the ship was actually confiscated. So we now have the capacity and the tools to act. My third point, which will be addressed more directly by the Secretary General, is that we will increase NATO's presence in the Baltic Sea. My fourth point is that we will continue to improve the use of modern technology in sussing out activity in the Baltic Sea and on infrastructure. My fifth point is that we will continue to deal with the shadow fleet of Russia robustly. My sixth point is a concrete one. We will work on a memorandum of understanding, similar one that we did between Finland and Estonia, on the critical infrastructure in the Baltic Sea. My sixth point is that we will set up a group of legal experts of the foreign ministries of Baltic Sea states, which will have a look at the freedom of navigation in international waters, on what kind of things we can actually do within the framework of sticking to the freedom of navigation. My eighth point is that we will provide a step-by-step report to our allies about the Finnish model that we used as of the 25th of December with the Shadow Fleet ship in question. My ninth point is that we will continue very close cooperation between NATO and the European Union. And my final and 10th point is that this was a meeting of Baltic Sea allied states, but we will very closely brief our NATO colleagues about the meeting and the conclusions that we drew from it.
Please.
Thank you. Tere, Alexander, dear Mark, dear journalists. As Alexander already summed up, this was a good meeting, not only in words, but a very strong and robust joint declaration, which will be available to everybody. For us, I would say from Estonia's side, working together with NATO allies and our Finnish colleagues, I would say that this kind of example that Finland is setting with dealing with the shadow fleets and possible harm doers, or however we like to call them, probably should be a benchmark for the future operations. So this probably is among the topics, the main topics coming from this kind of meetings. And I would say that everybody around the table and those allies that will be in contact later probably could agree that in the future, in Baltic Sea, Danish Straits, everywhere, if the message is sent that you will be dealt with if you harm infrastructure, that probably is the strongest possible response. To coming to today's meeting, I would say that the first thing to welcome is the launch of NATO's operation, that Mark will be much more concrete about it in details. I will say from Estonia's side and as a member of NATO that this prompt response from NATO's Secretary General and SACEUR is very welcomed, and I'm very grateful to our ally, to all the allies for the contributions right now, for the keeping up information coming during the holidays, and also contributions in the future. Second topic is already mentioned that for us the first thing talking about critical infrastructure is the ability to deter and send the message that you should not deal or hamper critical infrastructure, but the second one is ability to repair them. And as Alexander already pointed out, that we have this kind of basis of memorandum of understanding between Estonia and Finland. That should be also like a starting point for Baltic Sea NATO members, that how to deal with different infrastructure breaking, because things will happen. If they have happened once, they usually happen twice, after that the third time, and probably will be fourth and fifth. It's most probable. But if you are able to repair all the cables, let's say energy cables or different communications cables, that probably will give resilience and also the security to societies around the Baltic Sea. So very concrete basis for repairing and the ability to share this repairing burdens and different possibilities is the Memorandum of Understanding. And also the point that was already made, that the deterrence of shadow fleet, that probably also is on everybody's mind. We have already checked since June. Estonia has checked more than 300 tankers. 260 of them have presented their insurance documents, 62 have not. We have boarded 7, and it will continue. The same has done by Finns. It probably will be done by other countries, but to be honest, they are running money from Russia to have this kind of hybrid war against Europe, and also they are taking environmental possibility bomb in our seas. So we should deal with every possibility that the law allows us, and if needed, already pointed out, we need also better rules to act with them more automatically. So thank you.
Well, dear Alex, dear Kristen, Kristen, thank you so much for co-hosting this Baltic Sea Allies Summit. Today, allies from the region gathered to address the growing threat to our critical undersea infrastructure. And I can indeed say we had excellent discussions. Across the alliance, we have seen elements of a campaign to destabilize our societies through cyber attacks, assassination attempts and sabotage, including possible sabotage of undersea cables in the Baltic Sea, with damage to energy and telecoms cables that are vital for our nation's security and prosperity. In the last 2 months alone, we have seen damage to a cable connecting Lithuania and Sweden, another connecting Germany and Finland, and most recently a number of cables linking Estonia and Finland. Investigations of all of these cases are still ongoing, but there is reason for grave concern. Safeguarding our infrastructure is of utmost importance. Not only is this crucial for energy supply, whether from power cables or pipelines, but more than 95% of internet traffic is secured via undersea cables. And 1.3 million kilometers of cables guarantee an estimated $10 trillion worth of financial transactions every day. Recognizing the risks, allies and NATO have responded. Over the past 2 years, allies have stepped up military patrols near critical infrastructures. In May of last year, we established a new maritime center for the security of critical undersea infrastructure within NATO's Maritime Command in the United Kingdom. We have also intensified coordination efforts between NATO allies, the private sector and other partners. And we are working more broadly with the European Union. But we must do more. Today, I can announce that NATO is launching Baltic Sentry. Under the authority of NATO's Supreme Allied Commander, General Kristen, this military activity is part of our ongoing effort to enhance maritime presence and monitoring of key areas for our alliance. It will involve a range of assets, including frigates and maritime patrol aircraft, among others, and will enhance our vigilance in the Baltic. Second, we have agreed today to launch an initiative to deploy new technologies to this effort, including a small fleet of naval drones to provide enhanced surveillance and deterrence. We are also working with allies to integrate their national surveillance assets with NATO, ensuring comprehensive threat detection. Third, robust enforcement is essential. Finland has demonstrated that firm action within the law is possible. Ship captains must understand that potential threats to our infrastructure will have consequences, including possible boarding, impounding and arrest. And while such law enforcement roles are for national authorities, we are best served when there is complementarity between NATO's efforts to detect threats and deter aggression and national efforts to enforce the law. Lastly, enhancing resilience requires safer, more repairable and more redundant infrastructure. So that means we will work within our critical undersea infrastructure network, which includes industry operators to better protect and secure vital undersea assets. And we need to explore how best to ensure that the right incentives are in place for more resilient systems. So again, Alex and Kristen, thank you again for hosting us today. I'm confident that by working together with all allies, we will do what it takes to ensure the safety and security, not only of our critical infrastructure, but of all that we hold dear. Thank you.
Now it's time for questions, and the first question goes to Lauri Vahur, ERR.
Thank you very much. This is Vahur Lauri from Estonian Television News. So we have heard a new word, Baltic Sea Allied States, the BSAS. Congratulations. But my question actually goes to Secretary General. We have the Baltic air policing mission, which is to grow into a Baltic air defense mission, meaning that small states that don't have fighters can have help from other allies who have them. Do we see something similar happening on the Baltic Sea, something like a BSAS Navy that is kind of a navy of smaller states and bigger states that are kind of like a border patrolling, border defense mission? Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much for that question. Of course, what we have to do within NATO and with our allies is always looking at the best way how to organize ourselves. And sometimes that is through the forward land forces. Sometimes it is through jointly working on policing our airspace. But in this case, it is all about protecting the critical undersea infrastructure. And the point I'm trying to make today is that where in the past we would discuss cyber attacks and let's say sabotage and energy blackmail as being a sort of separate set of actions. What we want to show today is that as NATO, with our allies, we will make sure that our deterrence is in the right place, that we are able to exactly assess what is happening, that then the allies, individual allies, are able to take the necessary actions. That where we would talk in the past about hybrid threats, and it sounds a bit cuddly, hybrid, but hybrid means sabotage, hybrid means cyber attacks, hybrid means sometimes even assassination attempts, and in this case it means hitting on our critical undersea infrastructure, that the alliance will not accept that, and that we will do everything in our power to make sure that we fight back, that we are able to see what is happening and then take the next steps to make sure that it doesn't happen again. And our adversaries should know this. So, to your question, very good that we have all these separate ways of organizing ourselves, and we will be able to do it also in the future. But this is an initiative particularly focused on making sure we can protect our critical undersea infrastructure.
And Elina Kervinen, Helsingin Sanomat.
Thank you so much. My question is for all of you. Both you, Mr. Secretary General, and Swedish Prime Minister have said recently that we are not at war but not at peace either. What is your assessment at this time of the security situation in light of these 3 cut cables or broken cables recently in the Baltic Sea? And is there an increased threat of a military conflict in the area? Thank you so much.
Let me begin by referring to an excellent book that I read a few years back. It's by Mark Leonard, and the book is called The Age of Unpeace. And in many ways, I think that describes the world that we live in today. So the things that were supposed to bring us together, such as trade, interdependence, technology, or energy, or currency, they're now used to tear us apart. But there should be a clear distinction. On one hand, you have traditional kinetic warfare. That is what we see in the battlefields in Ukraine. And then on the other side, you have, no matter how you define it, hybrid warfare of sorts. And we are seeing those types of activities on the increase in so many different ways, especially coming from Russia. And this is exactly what we tried to address in this meeting. In other words, hybrid elements linked to both critical infrastructure and potential environmental damage.
Yeah, I very much agree. And let me add to this, that at this moment, when it comes to kinetic warfare, we are safe. The alliance is able to fight back to anyone who is trying to attack us. My biggest worry is that in 4 or 5 years we are not. If we will not invest more in our collective defense, if we will not do more to ramp up our industry production. That is why I made that comment. Yes, at this moment we are facing these acts of sabotage and assassination attempts and energy blackmail. So all these destabilizing actions, the so-called hybrid warfare. But at the same time, when it comes to 4 or 5 years, when we look at this moment, what the Russians are producing in 3 months, we are producing in a year, and we is from Los Angeles up to and including Ankara, so the whole of the alliance. And when we look at what we are spending and the purchasing power the Russians have with the amount of money they are spending, we are really getting into difficulty if we do not ramp up the money we spend on defense and ramp up the defense industrial base. And this is really crucial. And I've not even talked about China, which is also, of course, investing heavily in its military and will have 1,000 nuclear warheads by 2030. So we really have to do this. This is urgent. It is urgent now. This cannot wait till some summit somewhere. We really have to get this done in the next couple of months. And of course, the Hague summit will then play a big role here.
I would say the assessment is probably the same. As already mentioned, that right now Russia is pretty much dealing with the biggest armed conflict since Second World War in Europe, in Ukraine, this aggression. But Estonia has also been under constant cyber attacks on the cyber domain since 2007. And I would say that we are trying to attribute those attacks to countries doing them, and mostly done by Russia, by state players, criminal players, and so on. And the number has not gone down. The same on the sea and the critical infrastructure. On the sea, on mainland, on everywhere, because right now the situation is coming also to that Baltics are desynchronizing our energy grid from Russia, synchronizing to Central European grid, which is much more reliable, bigger, and also for the future energy exports much more viable. And Russia is not a reliable partner. And looking at the time, I would say that even if we don't know certainly that what are the motives behind breaking critical infrastructure, it has influences on everyday lives, on economy, on the feeling of security. So, as already mentioned, that even if these things happen like testing to NATO members, EU members, or they have no clear intent on each of events, I would say all in all, Mark already mentioned that we should be prepared, we should ramp up our defense capabilities in coming years, because I very much like the Finnish phrase that you should not be afraid, you should be prepared. So for Estonia, for every NATO country, that preparedness is probably the key with dealing and having a rule-based word, not arbitrary word where the borders can be changed by force. Thank you.
As we say, talk less, prepare more.
Yeah.
And here, third line.
Thank you. Hi, Terry Schultz with Deutsche Welle. To all three of you, this morning, even in the doorsteps, we heard, sorry, it's my voice, though. This morning, we heard different approaches among the leaders, the national leaders, about how assertive they're willing to be. From what you're saying now, there's been agreement that the Finnish approach is the way to go, that this is the way to deter the shadow fleet vessels from taking other malign actions. Do you have that agreement that within NATO, all the Baltic Sea countries, for example, Germany, are going to be willing to follow this model, that you will train law enforcement officials to scale the boats if necessary, to do what Finland did with the Eagle S? And is this possible under the current law of the sea, interpretation of the current law of the sea, without changes in the law, which of course would take a long time? Thank you very much.
Well, obviously it's up to each ally to act at the end of the day when something is happening. But what we are very clear about is that the shadow fleet is a big issue, not only because of sanctions circumvention and because of what happened with the cable cutting and the big environmental risks we are running through the shadow fleet, but we also all agree that we want to maintain UNCLOS, that means the law of the sea. But within UNCLOS, a lot is possible. And anyone listening to this press conference thinking that UNCLOS would prevent any of the allies within NATO to act when that is necessary would be wrong. There are many options and possibilities to do that. I'm not going into all the details because that is legally, of course, extremely, we have then to go to all the details of the legality. But I can assure you that we are all very much committed to make sure that our critical undersea infrastructure is protected. Of course, what we want to do is to do the max to cut off the Russians from this money.
So at the end of the day, it's really all about cooperation. So just like Mark said, the actual activity or action when a situation happens is national. The overall coordination is NATO. And the way in which I see it, and the way in which we have done it with our authorities, which, may I add, include our military, our border, our customs, and our police, is first the private sector company reports what has happened. So if a data cable is cut, they report to the authorities immediately. After that, the authorities detect, basically suss out which are the possible ships who were in that position when the cable was cut. Once that happens, you identify the ship and you contact the ship. And number 4, you stop the ship. Because what happened in this particular case, had it continued for another 12 minutes, the carnage would have been much worse than the 4 basic cables that were there. So we were able to stop it. After that, you ask the ship to move into your territorial waters, and then you can board the ship. Now, what we do with the working group that we set up with the legal experts from our foreign ministries is to understand what are the specific measures that can be taken. So, for instance, in Finland we have a law that despite the freedom of navigation, if we are on the verge of a possible natural catastrophe, environmental catastrophe, say an oil spill, then we have the authority to board the ship. And I must say that just the fact that we were successful in this third instance has also led to the fact that the responses that we have gotten in other instances have been an understanding that the Finns will act in these types of situations.
Yeah, I would add that for us it's the question that how everybody will respond already, as Alexander mentioned, that it's pretty much up to each member state, but also collectively setting some kind of benchmark and set of rules. And we, as partners, allies, probably are looking up to Finns. And I would say that next times, if we have like a threat or sabotage attempt towards critical infrastructure, probably the Finnish attitude should be a benchmark. And that is what we are talking around the table, that this should be the way we are dealing with very automatically. And also we are setting up different systems to have this kind of information better running between the countries, because Estonia and Finland have close cooperation, as different countries do. But the possibility that we will have questions about infrastructure, which is critical in the future, or environmental questions that will probably be big questions in our seas, it's very probable. So I would say we should emphasize that Finnish action right now is a benchmark we should follow. And after that, we will have a set of rules and procedures running up, and that probably will also send a signal to everybody that this is the way they will be dealt with if they try to sabotage or harm environment here. Thank you.
And next question to Herman Kelomies, Delphi.
Thank you very much. This is a question to all three of you about something that the Polish national broadcaster reported on barely an hour ago. Let me read to you. A Russian Shadow Fleet vessel has circled over a stretch of pipeline carrying Norwegian gas to Poland in the Baltic Sea, a source in the Polish Foreign Ministry has told the outlet. What I'm wondering is, has Mr. Tusk briefed you on this? Have you had a discussion about this? And is this perhaps a message to this summit? And a more broader question here is, you talk a lot about robust measures and punishment of perpetrators and all sorts of sanctions, but do I understand correctly that prevention, at the end of the day, prevention of these kinds of attacks will not be completely possible, basically ever?
Well, I mean, the first lesson to draw from all kinds of situations like this is to stay cool, calm, and collected. And if an event has happened 1 hour ago, and yes, we have been informed about it, but not directly yet by Prime Minister Tusk, we assess the situation, we look at the facts, and then base our activity on that. The more serious point, I think you're absolutely correct. You cannot prevent all actions of sabotage. And that's why it's so important that you have varying sources of, say, energy, or you have various sources of data cables that you can convert to, because that's the key in these types of situation. And I think that's one of the most important reasons why we also do a assessment of critical infrastructure in general. Remember, you have to ask yourself, in these 3 cases that we've seen in the past year, how much damage has been done to the general public in terms of energy receiving and in terms of data cables? Pretty much zero. That's because we have alternative sources. But now we need to find out ways. And one suggestion that was made in the room was that perhaps we should have one of these correcting vessels in the Baltic Sea all the time, because it takes time for them actually to come into the Baltic Sea. So many different options, but I don't think I can at least take issue yet with the reported hit that you mentioned.
I completely agree with the reaction you just gave. Nothing to add.
Yeah, a few words that, as already mentioned and as already asked, that it's quite probable that as in cyber domain you cannot protect every computer, working station, every plant. The same probably with critical infrastructure. The sea is connecting you to the world. You are neighbor, everybody is neighbor to Russia, China, whoever. This probably can be influenced that something will happen, but the ability to react and to have this kind of automatic system in the place, exchange information, and also afterwards the ability to repair. As Alexander mentioned, that up to this today, we have been able to react this way, that our economies or our everyday lives or resilience has not been hampered. But if you look at the energy, economy, environment, everything, it can be influenced much stronger. So it's the ability to react, also mop it up and deal later who has done and why. These are two abilities that we need. So one is NATO's operation running, countries running this kind of deterrence operation. The second one is our joint ability with European allies and everybody in the world to repair everything much faster so that the society will not be influenced by this kind of attacks.
You know, when you face new challenges, you react to them. I mean, the good example is 2007 when there was a cyber attack on Estonian banks. Mm-hmm. I mean, those kinds of cyber attacks, we don't even flinch anymore because our systems are so advanced that we're able to fight them off. And this is what also protecting critical infrastructure in the Baltic Sea is about. You live and learn. You detect, you try to prevent, and then you repair and cause minimal damage to society.
Maria Stenroos, Finnish Broadcasting Company.
Hi. Could you be more detailed on the operation which could happen on Baltic Sea? What kind of a protective operation presence, measures there will be on the Baltic Sea? For example, how many military vessels to prevent further damage happened?
No, very good question. And of course, for the past 2 years already, as you know, allies have stepped up military patrols near critical infrastructure. Baltic Sentry will encompass more ships, maritime aircraft patrols, submarine satellites, and surveillance drones. I'm not going into detail how many ships exactly, because that might differ from 1 week to another, and we don't want to make the enemy any wiser than he or she is already. What matters is that we will employ the right military assets in the right places at the right time to deter future destabilizing acts. And again, we will make use of the full range of possibilities we as an alliance have, as I just mentioned, including remotely operated vehicles. And we will also employ the latest technology here, including, as I mentioned in my statement, the drones.
And last question to Reuters.
Thank you. Anna Kauran for Reuters News. I would like to ask you if you believe that the recent cable cutting incidents in the Baltic Sea had for a purpose to hinder the Baltic power decoupling plans. Thank you.
I would say that no matter the reasoning behind it, they won't hinder Baltic decoupling, the synchronizing from Russia's grid. Because the date has been set, it's in place, and the Baltics are also prepared for emergency decoupling if needed. But as said, the date is set and we are ready. But usually in energy matters, you have plans, and after that you have reserve plans, and after that you have reserve plans for reserve plans, and you hope that they work. And in the Baltics, all the energy people on private sector, state side, have been working very hard with desynchronizing from Russia's grid at the start of February, and also the Central European grid on the Polish side, in the European side, have been also working on that. So I would say that if the intent or the possible outcome would be to hamper decoupling from Russia's energy grid, it probably won't work. We have reserves and reserve plans, but it can cause some kind of inconvenience, which probably could be intended message that Baltics and Nordics do not live well and do not work well without Russia's embrace. That probably could be the idea behind of this kind of messages. But coming back to the original saying that we will decouple anyway and desynchronize from Russia's grid because Russia is not a reliable partner in these matters. Thank you.
Yeah, and let me perhaps just leave you with a following thought. When we're talking about attacks on critical infrastructure, at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter who did it and why they did it, because the consequences are always the same. it's damage. And our job is to try to prevent that damage from hitting society in general. The problem is that sometimes to the east of us, we're dealing with a country which has a combination of incompetence and indifference. And when that happens, I think we have to be always prepared and therefore try to stay at least one step ahead. And let me assure you that sometimes we will succeed, but there will be cases, again, when we will not succeed of being one step ahead. And in that case, we will again take lessons learned and deal with it, hopefully, as we did on the 25th of December.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you.